What's up, you guys? FSC Truck Shop. Well, the last video we tore it down to the heads, got the heads off I should say. Now what we have to do is start tearing it down the rest of the way. Ultimately the goal is to get her down to bare block and to start sending parts out to the machine shop. Ultimately there are differences in this engine compared to a truck engine, so we're going to get into that hopefully in this video, perhaps in part 4. I'm not sure in what order we're going to do it. But this accessory drive is different. Usually the accessories on these Detroits that go in trucks are usually towards the rear. That's the air conditioning compressor, the air compressor for your brakes, along with your alternator. This particular one had it up front, so we're going to see how that'll go together. But with that, I'm not sure whether we will reuse the front end or not, or how it was set up. As long as it fits in the truck, personally, I don't care, but we'll figure that out as time goes. But either way, I've got to take this all apart and bring it down to bare block. As you can see, it's no longer on the pallet. That was a story in and of itself, getting her up on these jack stands, considering I don't have a forklift truck to lift it. So that was a little bit of finagling with a cherry picker and a floor jack and a pin jack, but I got it done. So either way, we're going to start tearing it down. I think the first thing I'm going to do, though, is get the liners out and show you exactly how a 12V71 Detroit works, considering it's a 2-stroke, not a 4-stroke diesel. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pick up the kitty litter that cleaned up the oil that I spilled just a little bit ago, and then we're going to start pulling the oil pan down and then start pushing the liners out. These two are rear facing, going into the bell housing. There's two in the back that are much longer, go up into the block through a larger hole in the oil pan here, about that long. There's also two more in the front, even longer. This is also a multi-piece oil pan. Got these two long ones here. See the length. Couple of well-placed bumps with a hammer, it ought to just come right out. Or not. That's all it was. That's what I thought. Well, just a friggin' drain plug. Damn it. Okay, so plainly with my dumb ass, I left the forward 2 bolts in. Apparently, there's 2 more bolts going through the back of the flywheel housing behind the flywheel. You have to take the flywheel off to take the oil pan down? Who thought of that? I was trying to avoid taking the flywheel off so I could use the flywheel to lock it in position when I go to take the front end off. And I know from working on Orwell, these things are heavy. Yeah, so the hope was to avoid taking this off. Aside for some mouse droppings, I don't see any bolts that go into the, no, there are no bolts that go into the oil pan. Well, why in the hell is the oil pan so stuck? Well, hopefully I don't have to put this back on. What the hell now? So now the oil pan is loose, and I had to take the sump out of it. This way I could disconnect the oil pickup tube, which, believe it or not, I think there are two. Now I have to hold up the oil pan so I can disconnect that oil pickup. I mean, you gotta be kidding me. All right, now let's try this again. Work for this one. Whew. Yeah. Okay, boys and girls, so now after all that trouble with getting that oil pan off, let me tell you, that's a pain right there in of itself. With that oil pan is no good for our application, so away it goes. After all that trouble, I managed to get it down. According to the book, there is a large difference when it comes to the oil pumps on these engines. Both the 8V71 and the 6V71 share an oil pump, which would be in the front housing part of the assembly over the crankshaft. On the 12V71, however, it's very similar to a B model cat or 3406B, even your E's, I guess. But either way, it bolts in from the bottom. You don't have to take this apart to get the oil pump out. which is good because I don't want to take this apart quite yet. I'm trying to get the oil pump out of the way so we can get the sleeves out. So what we're going to do is go ahead and show you how to take the oil pump off. By the way, there are 2 pickups on this thing. It's not a very complicated thing, but I'll tell you what, this engine, there's no way it'll start for oil provided there's oil in it. Okay, boys and girls, so the way it works is oil is picked up through here, up in the oil pump, also through here into the oil pump. Once it gets over 100 psi, whatever it doesn't shove into the engine comes out this tube and gets sent back into the sump. On the other side, there's another kind of relief valve. So what I have to do is take these tubes off, and then the oil pump comes off from the top down. On the front here is a gear that spins the oil pump. So with that, we're going to go ahead and start pulling these tubes off. Okay, so that tube comes off. Now on the other side is where this tube comes off from. Oil pump. This here is one of the pressure relief valves. Take that off as well. Whoa! And that was full of water. Yeah, nice, huh? Okay, boys and girls, so now we got the tubing off, so now we've got to just take loose the pump. Easier said than done. I wonder if this water isn't from a failure or whether it just sat outside for too long or something. On this side is another one of those bypass tubes that lets oil out of the system at a certain PSI. It's on this side where it outputs out of the pump and up into the block. Not too bad with the leaking, but leaking. And this last one should take the pump out. Yep. See, she's angling over now. Literally just hanging on the friction of the bolts that hold it up. Hopefully it won't break my arms. No, not terribly heavy, but heavy enough. There you go, oil pumps out. Now, one thing I forgot to mention before I got done, but while I was cleaning up the oil, there are shims that came off with, there we go. There are shims that came off with the oil pump. They go between the pump and the block to get the spacing between the gears right. I forgot to mention that. The book did mention these, but I didn't mention it. I forgot about it. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I'm assuming there's 3 on the front, 3 on the back. These shims have to be replaced when I replace the oil pump. So I have to read up as far as what thickness and all that to use, but there are shims when you put an oil pump in a Detroit, apparently. I'll go put this with the pump. There they are. Okay, boys and girls, I'm going to show you a trick that I learned watching the YouTube channel Bust Grease Monkey. So I'm going to pull the cylinder all the way down, and I'm going to insert this rod. I'm going to stick it between the reeds in the cylinder, which are those little air holes on the bottom. Then what you do is turn it till it comes top dead center and shoves the cylinder up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to back it down a little bit now. That way I could take the cap off of the connecting rod bearing. That way it'll come up as a unit. To move it closer so I can get to it easier. There, that should be much easier to get to. Now it's labeled on there 2L and 2R. That's how they labeled them. By the way, the labels are on the outside portion, and the caps, as I'll show you later, are different sizes. So the wider portion comes out, the narrower portion goes in. I'll show it to you once we get it out of the engine. You notice over here, this part away from the center towards the main journal is bigger than this side. Like I said, this one's 2L. This one here matches 2L stamped there. So if you know that the shallower part goes to the inside where it meets the other rod, there's no way to put it in backwards. So now what I'll do is I'll rotate the crank to push the cylinder out of the block now. And it should just lift right out with the piston attached. And it kind of dropped the piston on me. There we go. Okay, boys and girls, so this piston right here gives us a lot to learn. First off, I didn't mark the cap on the connecting rod. However, you really don't need to. If you'll notice, one side is bigger than the other. Now take a look at the bearing. On the cap side, it's really not that bad looking. However, look at your rod. That bearing is down into the second layer of metal. I'm not sure what metal we're dealing with these bearings, but that's chewed down terribly. That's gone. Also, made in Japan. So this is obviously a rebuild kit, not original Detroit diesel parts. The piston itself, well, that looks pretty scored, but not terribly, I guess. The rings are all loose, all of them, except for these. Now these are reasonably loose too. Either way, there's your piston. So we'll just put it together quickly. Notice also they're stamped 1R, 1R. In other words, it's the first cylinder hole, right side.